mine was gonna throw it at me.
No.
Yeah, take Jeff's.
You already have two.
They do it. There's trouble. How are you doing?
We took your water because you're late.
Well, that's probably a good thing. How you doing? Good, how about you? Good.
All right, it looks like we are close enough to the witching hour. We've got everyone here that is coming this evening. Welcome. Oh, I used to turn this on. There we go, sorry. Welcome. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, and I appreciate the turnout that we have thus far. Before we begin with the public hearing portion, we will have Ryan Thomas present sort of the issue. This is a public hearing to hear comment on the proposed policy/rule CKA. For those of you that have been following this issue, it is essentially the very same policy that we adopted through a policy process last year. We are now going through the rulemaking process to make it official. But I will let staff talk about that a little bit before we get started. Just so you know sort of the ground rules for the evening. This is a public hearing to hear your comments to us. We are actually not allowed to engage and comment back to you. We will not be discussing it. We just will be taking a lot of notes about your input. We will be asking you to provide your name. You don't need to give me your address. I just need to know whether or not you're a resident of the district. And your affiliation, if any. In other words, are you employed by the district? Are you a parent? Are you just a citizen at large? Let us know name, whether or not you reside in the district, and your affiliation. Those are the only three things we need. And then go ahead and comment. We would ask that you be concise if you can. If you want to just stand up and say, I agree or I disagree, that's okay too. Some of you will probably take longer than others. We would like to give everyone the opportunity to say as much or as little as they want, so be mindful of the others in the room. I don't know that all of us want to be here until midnight, but we will if we need to. So if someone has essentially made a comment with which you agree and want to add your name, you can stand up and say ditto to whomever. That's fine too, and we will be making note of that. We will continue this hearing after this evening until next week as well, and have more public comment next week. And then it will be on the 29th of January that the board will then begin under a work session to discuss the comments and have our own discussion of what was heard here in the next 2 weeks, tonight and tomorrow. So with that, Mr. Thomas, I will turn it over to you.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I think you did a great job explaining kind of where we are in the process and procedure. With these public hearings tonight and next Tuesday, as you said, we'll just take comments. We'll do our best to take good minutes, and so the board will be able to see them when they review the comments. On the 29th, it is a work session, which there'll be no action taken. The work session is simply for you to take some time together to discuss the comments you've received. I have shared those with all of you, all the ones we received so far. We'll put this in a similar format. And then what I assumed, and Madam Chair and I haven't got to that point yet, but on the 29th, we'll just go by topics. There's a group of emails. There's a group of comments that were made on the website. There's a group of, that was hard copy, I've called it, that we can review. And then the comments we'll receive orally. It'll be an opportunity for the board to discuss, ask questions, and prepare to respond. So that's really the part that's different. From the 29th until the board meeting in March. That will be an opportunity for administration to put your comments, your responses together in a book. That book will be used from March until April for you to study, I guess help you make your decision. And then in April, the rule will be up for a vote. Hopefully, a full month will allow you to get into all the comments, all the articles, the research that was done, and the data that will be presented or has been presented. One thing I would add is I appreciate you clarifying what they need to do, but they need to come to the podium. This is streamed, and what we've found from individuals is if your mic isn't on, they're not going to hear you. Remember, we are upgrading our system, but it won't be in probably till the middle of February. So please make sure your mic is, well, you guys don't have to comment. So the mic is on there, and anyone who wants to come forward, even to say ditto, make sure you give us your name, your affiliation, and if you live in the district. Mr. Phillips, have I missed anything?
I don't think so.
Okay.
All right. With that said, we will open, open the public hearing and invite anyone to come comment at the podium.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Bennett.
I move to limit the debate per person to 10 minutes.
Okay, we have a motion to limit the debate per person to 10 minutes.
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Welling. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. So that means, folks, that everybody gets 10 minutes each. And Mr. Bennett or someone will be the timekeeper and let us know. Okay, thank you. Again, with that said, we will open up the public comment period and invite you to the podium.
Scott Robinson. I am affiliated with the district as a science teacher, and yes, I do live in the district. Okay. I would like to address my comments here to an article published this week in Town Hall, and I have a copy for each of the board members here. I'd like to. Okay, this Town Hall article basically deals with the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School of Public Safety, in which I'm sure you've probably heard all you want to hear in the news on both sides of this issue. It is profound in its effect on the American public, and this issue in particular. And by the way, if any of you would like, I have copies here that I can distribute to you. The first paragraph, I will just dwell on that for a second. It says, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Commission stirred up controversy last week when they erred on the side of common sense and the Second Amendment. The commission investigating the so-called Valentine Day's massacre left 14 students and 3 teachers dead, and another 17 people wounded. Recommend that teachers were willing to volunteer, undergo background checks, psychological evaluations, and training, and be allowed to carry concealed firearms on campus. Folks, this is probably one of the biggest turnarounds in the history of American education. For a school board to vote 13-1, I pray we don't make the same mistake they made. You wouldn't want to be in their boat. And the article goes on, it discusses several things, but it does an excellent job of describing the mental status of teachers. And it compares in there several professions, of which they directly compare them to our police force. Now, I'm not here to badmouth our police force. I'm a graduate of the police academy myself. But in all the professions they looked at, teachers were the most stable. Teachers had a lower rate of suicide than any other group. Police officers, who is the alternative in this situation is at the bottom of that list. And I'm not drawing aspersions. I know they deal with a totally different deal than we do. But what I'm asking you to do is to consider, and I'll jump down to the bottom of the first page where it says, secondly, we all have fond memories of our favorite teacher growing up. I'm sure you can remember that teacher who took time to give you words of encouragement that made you believe in your dream, that your dreams were possible. They realized your potential, and even before you did, remember that teacher who wasn't afraid to call your parents if it meant they could get better results out of you because they knew you were capable of more. We can all remember those teachers who simply showed they cared. Now imagine one of those teachers voluntarily undergoing a psychological evaluation and firearms training to protect you from harm in the unlikely event of a mass shooting. Do you think they'd hesitate to take a bullet or fire one to protect your child from a shooter if they had to? I don't. They have a bond with their students that cops never will. Okay, and like I say, that is not drawing aspersions on our law enforcement. I support and appreciate our law enforcement totally. And I have been through what they've been through. The last sentence in there, we trust teachers with our kids' futures, why not with their lives? And that's basically what it comes down to. I will add one thing. There's a t-shirt that I see that I like, and I have referred to it all the time, saying it says an armed society is a polite society. Now I know we're going to have disagreement here tonight. You need to realize what the old football coach, the Pittsburgh Steelers, said. He says, we can disagree, but we don't have to be disagreeable. Now, I've known a lot of the people in this room, and I know I disagree with some in my own department on this very subject. I'm not disagreeable. But I will tell you one thing, as I've studied this position from top to bottom. There are a lot of bad people out there with guns. The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun who's better prepared and better trained. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Colin Wilson. I do live in the district. I'm a math teacher at the high school. Before I came here, I taught in Clark County School District in Las Vegas for 13 years. I got to see what it was like being in some schools where you fear for your life, where there are gunshots that go off often. When I taught at one of the inner city schools there in Las Vegas, Western High School, it was one of those things, at least 2 or 3 times a year, we were going to have gunfire on campus. And there was absolutely nothing any of us could do. Nothing. Besides hiding. We couldn't protect ourselves. We couldn't protect our students. We could do nothing for them. I eventually moved to one of the nicest schools in Las Vegas, Northwest CTA, a career and technical academy that was a magnet school. It was considered one of the elite schools. And yet we still had some of the same problems there. We had a student that was stopped on the edge of campus by the FBI with his car loaded full of explosives. Now, in that case, the law enforcement did a wonderful job. We all greatly appreciated it. But one of his friends, 2 months later, came onto campus and was on campus walking around, heavily armed, for 45 minutes before anybody found out about it. When they went and looked in his car, they found about another dozen guns fully loaded. I support this. And I support this because I know that there are teachers that I trust, that I work with, that I know will do the right thing when the time comes to protect the students of this school district. We have some great people that we work with here. I think the time is coming when even in the schools where we think that we are totally safe, we need to be prepared. And if we're not prepared, we will regret it. Thank you for your time.
Hello. Some of you might know me. I'm Susan Anderson, formerly an employee of Una County School District Number 1. Tonight, I debated whether to come here. I finally asked my children if they wanted me to come to speak against the CKA policy on their behalf, and they both said yes. In my family, we believe that the world is inherently good. We do not believe we need guns to protect us, nor do we believe we need to carry guns as we travel in the wild or meet people throughout the world. We believe that if you are kind and loving, others will be kind and loving in return. That is the most fundamental value that we teach our children in our home. As some of you may know, I began searching for a new teaching position moments after the vote passed on the CKA policy last spring, and I was fortunate to be given the opportunity to work at Mountain View High School. My husband and I made a difficult decision to keep our children, Jonah and Anna, enrolled at Uinta Meadows Elementary, even though we were told we could not request that our children be put into classrooms without guns. This was a hard decision, but we trust in the love and care that Mr. Dastrup and his staff provides for Jonah and Anna. We are very grateful to Una County School District Number 1 for the security changes in the schools and feel that this is the right path to protect our children. We too were relieved when the district was told to cease the policy this fall and hoped that we would not have to revisit this controversial topic again. Unfortunately, we must. I debated on whether to come here tonight because I think no matter what members of the public say, this board will pass this policy. Here is the clincher for me that I don't think many community or board members think about. Teachers are taught that personal relationships with our students could be the saving grace for whether a child succeeds or does not. Your children, I have taught some of your children, walk through my classroom door and I treat them like my own children. What if, for some reason, your child decides that today's the day and the only option for them is to bring a gun into the school? Board members and community members, your child is my child. I cannot kill my child. I will do everything in my power to protect your children, but I cannot kill my child. One last note. Now that my family is facing this decision once again, my son, who loves his UME family with all of his heart, has requested to transfer to Mountain View Elementary if this policy passes again. Thank you.
My name is Julie O'Connell. I am a resident of this district, and I'm a parent of 2 children at Uinta Meadows. I am opposed to the adoption of the CKA policy. I believe that we're never going to change people's minds about guns. You either choose to have them in your lives or you don't. And this is not what we're arguing tonight. I think it would be naive for us to think that we can live our lives without ever encountering a firearm. But we can choose to eliminate our encounters with firearms in public places, especially in churches and schools. I have decided not to raise my children with guns in my home, and that is my choice and my right. I ask that you respect my choice as a parent to allow my children to live a gun-free life as long as that may be possible. I'm asking you to be considerate of members of this community who choose gun-free lives and to honor their rights by not forcing them into a setting where they feel at risk. I ask you to please consider leaving firearms in the hands of professionals, our local law enforcement, during emergency situations. Teachers do not have a life safety mindset cultivated by police experience. And conversely, officers are not familiar with the unique relationships that exist between teachers and students. I'm not asking you to change your beliefs, and I believe most of you have already made your decision. But I am asking you to please fairly represent all members of this community. If you should choose to adopt this policy, I ask that you grant my request for an accommodation that my children not be placed in any classrooms with armed staff, and you can please refer to my letter requesting this accommodation that I submitted last week. Thank you.
Board, thank you. So, Bob, Robert Jorgensen, live here, been here my whole life. Kids in school. So, I was here this last debate, conversation, not an argument. Conversation that we want to talk about how to protect all of our kids, make us all safer, right? We're in a time, completely different time. And when I was in school, we never had anybody, last year that came to school with a pellet gun, 22 slash, whatever you call it, in his car. If we did, we know about it. He didn't accuse anybody. He said, I'm going to pull you out and do this stuff. That never happened. Okay? So now we're talking a whole different social time we want to do to try to protect our kids, right? So I hear people talking, cops training, this, that. You're right. The whole thing this comes down to is training. If we're willing to put up our money to go be trained, certified through one of the top schools in Vegas, to be in this thing. We got broken into here last summer, okay? Well, spring. My gun sat by my bed. I didn't get up and shoot his butt sitting on my doorstep. I wish I would have. We would have never been through this whole case we're in right now. Me and my wife are going to counseling for this, and I'm pissed that I failed my family because I didn't do that, because I didn't have the training to think I'm asleep, I should have grabbed it, should have done this. It all comes back to training. All of you go through, different trainings. If you're in the school district, if you're not, you all have to consistent training to make yourself mind-taught and thorough to be accurate about what you're going to do. I would express, if we're passing this, everybody that's going to do this, we don't know who they are, and I don't want to know who they are. But you're going to have the most utmost training and be on the point, just like the cops do, just like our private investigators do, to be on point for that. So this way this never happens. It's to know you don't have a gun. If you had a gun, if you didn't have a gun, it doesn't matter. We don't want to know that. But if you do come into our school, great security we brought into this year. I go to the high school to try to have lunch with the wife. Man, that's like locked down, fingerprinted, badge ID'd, retinal scan. I'm like, whoa, hey, I got some Subway. Can I go talk for a minute? It's fantastic, right? But that's not going to stop anything. I didn't go through a metal detector. I didn't go through this, didn't go through this. You can't stop a crazy person that wants to carry a gun to not carry a gun. Like our gentleman said, a safe person with a gun can counteract a bad person with a gun. So I'm supportive of this, but I'm supportive of the active training, and that's what will make this a good, solid venture for our district to do. It's all about training. Whether they pay for it, we pay for it, the government pays for it, because there's tons of programs that'll pay for it. There's a shooting every day that we don't hear about, or a person with a gun in a school every day, some part in the U.S. You can look it up. New York Times is publishing them. Colorado was here 2 days ago. California was, we'll talk about Fashion Place Mall yesterday. It was crazy times, right? It's stability for people. So I appreciate his time, but training is what I'm encouraging for, so.
Hi, Jamie Jorgensen, employed through the school district and also a parent. I do live in Evanston. Like my husband, I am very much for this. The times are changing. We go to Fashion Place all the time. I'm so grateful we weren't there Sunday to have our kids experience that. But like that Army recruiter, he was trained in that. He knew exactly what to do. He got his family safe, and then he went to help. There's a lot of people in the school district that have had that training in their past, like Mr. Robinson. He's gone through the police academy. He's done that. Mr. Wilson is a veteran. We have a lot of veterans at the high school. We have a lot of veterans throughout the school district. I'm one of them. I've been through that training. I know what to do. Would I want to possibly, hurt another student? No, I don't want to do that. I would put my life on the line before that. But if it means them versus a classroom of 27 students, I would do it. And I think it's amazing, the training. I read through the policy today. I think it's great about the confidentiality. I think it's wonderful that I'm not going to know who is carrying. It's nobody else's business but theirs and your guys's. And I think that if most people actually read through the policy and looked at all the different steps that they have to go through, like the 5-year, employee, I think that's amazing. And just overall, I think that, we constantly heard about our teachers have so much already on their plates. Well, the number one, besides teaching my child, when I send my kid to school, I want to know they're safe. I don't want to end up sending them there knowing that, oh, my kid is possibly in danger because their teacher can't handle them. That is the other number one responsibility of being in teaching, being an administrator, making sure that when I drop my kid off at that door, they are safe because they're in your hands. If they're not, then you got to deal with me. And Mama Bear is not nice when that happens. And I would expect the same from you guys when you put your children in my hands, is that I'm going to make sure they're safe. And that is why I'm 100% for this policy. Thank you.
My name is Bird Gilmartin. I am a pediatrician here at Evanston Regional Hospital, and I live in the district. I'm here as a mother, but I cannot help but be a pediatrician as well. And as a pediatrician, I've devoted my life's work to the safety, health, and well-being of children. And I believe that as a physician, I'm obligated to practice evidence-based medicine, meaning to follow the most current science and evidence that we have of what best practice is to help guide us in our decisions. It's how I understand my everyday life and my everyday work, and I have to apply those same principles here. And as I apply those principles, I do not believe that we have enough evidence to support this policy. So as a pediatrician, as a mother, and as an advocate for the safety and health of children, I have to oppose this. And I am not alone. In the United States of America, over 90% of pediatricians are opposed to these such policies because we believe it's counter to the safety, health, and well-being of children. The American Academy of Pediatrics is the professional organization of which I am a member and who guides pediatric care for children. And they have a policy statement from November of 2012, and it states that the absence of guns from children's homes and communities is the most reliable and effective measure to prevent firearm-related injuries in children and adolescents. And I think that's where I think the evidence falls short, is that When I look at the evidence and I look at the FBI survey that was done from 2000 to 2013, they found that we are 9 times more likely to have an accidental shooting than to save someone in an attempt to help. In that same study of the FBI analysis of active shooters, they found that only 3% of active shooter events were stopped by someone with a gun, and over 13% were stopped by an unarmed person. The Harvard School of Public Health's Injury Control Research Center concludes that places with more guns have more gun deaths. And I think when you look at the New York Police Department, as they are looking at their active shooter data, they know that 18% of the time, only 18% of the time, do trained New York police officers hit their intended target. Also in the FBI active shooters survey from 2000 to 2013, law enforcement suffered casualties 46% of the time in active shooters events. And these are people that are trained to do this as part of their job, and almost 50% of them are either being injured or shot when they go into these engagements. And so, for those reasons, I believe that we do not have enough data to support this. I would also echo the other woman's sentiments of that we might not come to an agreement on this, and we have to live with those discrepancies. But I truly believe that my child is less safe in a classroom and in a school with guns in it, and I do not have the parental right at this time with this policy to keep my children safe in the best way that I see fit as their parent, and that is in a gun-free classroom or school. And we allow parents to opt out of immunizations all the time. That poses a public health risk, not just to the school community, but the entire community at large, and that is their parental right. Me opting out of having my child in a classroom with a gun or a school with a gun is not a decision I'm making for another parent or another child, and yet it's being removed from me as a parent. And I find that to be troublesome. And so, based on that, I stand in opposition of this policy. Thank you for your time. This is
members of the board and administration. My name's Carl Allred. I'm a resident here. My 3 kids all graduated from school here. I have some more kids coming up that'll probably be going to school here. I'll tell you, I'm a veteran, and I'm an ex-sheriff's deputy. You know, it'd be great if we had a gun-free place, and everybody could sit around in a circle and sing Kumbaya. But that's not the way our society lives today. You know, when I went to high school, we all kept rifles in racks in the back of our trucks at the school in the parking lot, and we'd go out hunting afterwards. People didn't get shot at school very often. It was very rare. You know, when you talk about, as the previous speaker said, things that very few of the active shooter mass shootings have been stopped by people with guns. That's because the majority of them are in gun-free zones. Almost every single mass shooting in the United States has happened in a gun-free zone. There's a few. The shooting in Trolley Square a few years back, and it was an off-duty officer who had a gun with him that stopped that. You had a shooting at a school down at a church in Colorado where someone with a concealed weapon shot and stopped the person. You know, nobody's asking for teachers to walk around in combat gear, packing guns so everybody can see it. Like I say, the policy is they're concealed. Nobody knows who has them. The kids aren't going to know if the teacher has a gun. But they're going to be able to protect them if something happens. You know, you hear all kinds of concerns. You know, what happens when law enforcement shows up? Who do they know that has a gun or not? You know, you train for that. The law enforcement does. If they know that there's a firearm there, that a good guy has one, they know how to deal with that. I've cleared buildings before where we've had shooters. I've been shot at. And I have also had people get shot by me, and I've had to sit there and watch them die. You know, I've gone into homes where people have called the police because somebody has entered their house, and they have sat back, barricaded in a bathroom or a bedroom, and we know where they are, with a firearm. They're not out looking for the guy, but if they come in the room where they're at, they can protect themselves. None of our teachers are going to go out hunt these people down in the schools. But imagine that they can protect those kids in the classroom if he comes through that door, as compared to a whole bunch of kids huddled behind desks with nothing to protect them and they get shot. You can look right here to a neighbor to the north, what happened in Cokeville. If a teacher had had a firearm there, that entire scenario could have been put to rest a lot quicker. One of the worst things I've ever had to do in my life is to go to a family and inform them that their child was dead. And for all these people who don't want our teachers to be able to protect them when something happens in our schools, if by some chance, and by the grace of God it never will, but if something happens in one of our schools, are they going to be the one to go tell the parents that their child is dead because they opposed our schools being able to protect our kids? And I've walked into schools where they've had concertina wire, metal detectors at the doors, and it looks like a darn prison. And I don't want our kids to have to go to school in a place like that. I want them to be in a comfortable, welcoming atmosphere. But barring that, you're never going to be able to keep somebody who wants to come in and harm our kids from walking through those doors. You can have all the signs in the world you want checking at the front desk. And if they want to come in, they're coming. I've been there. And I don't want somebody to have to walk up and tell one of our parents that their kid is not going to come home today because somebody didn't want our schools to protect them. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amanda Bounds. I am a parent and I've lived in this district my entire life. I was actually born here. I am 100% for this. I know that there's a lot of mothers who do not want their children around guns, and that is 100% their choice. In my house, I believe that my children need to know what is in this world and how to protect themselves. They need to know that there's people out there who don't care if they don't want to have guns around them. They're going to do it anyways. They need to know that there's other people who will protect them. So every single time we are in a public area and there's a police officer, I make a point to point them out to them. and let them know he is carrying a gun. If something is to happen, you need to get down and look for him. And both of my boys, they're 6 and 3 years old, and they understand this. They've been raised around guns. I was raised around guns. I have made sure that my children know what happens if they decide that they want to play with one. They know that they can take a life with it. They know that they can severely hurt someone with it. So my children don't play with guns. As a matter of fact, they don't really, you can leave it on a bed and they'll walk away from it. I know that there's a lot of people who don't raise their children this way, but I am for this because there's a lot of people who don't care about anybody else's life. There's going to be people in this world who are mad or not in their right minds, and they're going to walk into a situation knowing that it's a gun-free zone, just like the previous gentleman said. Most of those mass shootings are in places where they know that no one else is going to shoot back at them. They already have that sense of security knowing that they're not going to get shot until the police show up. I don't want that to be our schools. I don't want it to be open to these people that know we're not going to do anything to them until the police officers show up. They need to have the sense of, you fire at us, we will fire back at you. It might be a deterrent to keep them out of our schools. That's it.
My name is Katie Bepler. I am a resident of Evanston. I'm a former teacher, and I believe that you received a letter from me last week in which I detailed all the reasons that I am opposed to this policy. So I would just like to add to that that I think that the decision by this board, or the board actually without the new members, was an emotional decision. And I don't think it was based on a lot of data. And I believe that if you will take the time to look at the data, you might just want to reconsider. I'd also ask you to consider what's happened in our schools. We have a lot of division now in our schools. We have those who are in favor and those who are not. And I really don't believe it's a very warm and appropriate culture for our students to be learning in an environment like that, where teachers are opposed to each other, where there's this division and unrest. And maybe we need to focus more on education than on what we're doing right now. And I do applaud, as I said in my letter, I do applaud your efforts, the efforts of the district, to increase the safety of our students. And I think what we've done, and if we would apply those measures consistently in the future, we would have safe schools. We all want safe schools. And I think you will see that the data shows that bringing guns into the schools does not necessarily make them more safe. Thank you.
I'm Alan Dancer. I teach over at Davis Middle School. I'm a band director over there and a resident of the district. I just want to share my story of my 48 years of teaching. The first 20 years, I would say, no, we don't need to have any type of firearms in the school. I changed my mind when I taught at Wolf Point, Montana for 11, 12 years on Fort Peck Indian Reservation. We had an incident there, school year 94, 95, if I remember right. Several of our students got in a fight with students from another school, rival school. Apparently our students won the fight. The students from the other school decide they need revenge. So on Monday morning, after the Saturday night fight, four of them loaded up into a car with a couple of rifles, and they were coming over to shoot our kids. We had a lockdown. And I'll tell you right now, being locked in a band room with 65 kids is not fun. I was scared to death. There's no two ways about it. They were scared to death. I had high school football players who were trembling. There was tears, there was crying. Those kids were deathly afraid. We had no way of defending ourselves. The only thing I think of is if these kids made it in, best we could do is throw instruments at them. That's the best we could do. Fortunately, the FBI, BIA, Sheriff's Department, City Police got wind of this and were able to stop the kids before they made it on campus. They pulled a traffic stop, recovered 2 rifles, and hauled the kids off. They were deadly serious. The reaction of the faculty at that was, we need to do something. So we got up different types of scenarios as far as defending our school and things like that. Not a mention was made of Army teachers, anything like that. But a number of us, which is I think a majority of the faculty, we decided we'd park our cars off school property, and in our cars, in our trunk, we would have something in case this thing happened. We wanted a chance. That's all we wanted, to defend our kids. Because, as a lady said earlier, these are our kids, and we will defend them to the death. They're our kids. Just like my family is, I'll stand and defend them to the death. My 6th grade band, 7th, 8th grade, all of them, same thing. They're my kids. And all I'm asking is, we have a chance. That's all we're asking, a chance to defend them. Okay, thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Jorgensen. I have put 2 children through this school system, and now I'm looking at 5 grandchildren coming through the school system. I'm definitely for this. I believe we need to take whatever steps are necessary to keep our children safe. Now, we would all like to think that this just happens someplace else, that it's not going to happen to us. But we need to remember that we are right on the I-80 corridor. This is the major route, east to west. Anybody that doesn't believe there are bad people running up and down that road, drugs, guns, you name it, it's passing right through the center of our town. So, although the people in this community we feel fairly safe with, which you can look just as close as the Salt Lake Valley, it's not the safe place that it used to be. And we're the first step away from them. There is too much coming through here not to take every advantage that we can. I agree with Mr. Allred. A gun-free zone is a killing zone. Now, as far as training goes, anybody that has carried a gun concealed, one of the first things they do whenever they walk into a room or whenever people come into a room is they look, because they know what it takes to conceal a gun. And it's very easy for a person that carries a gun on a regular basis to spot somebody that doesn't carry a gun on a regular basis. And it's simply a matter of just paying a little bit of attention. So if we have our teachers trained and they do this on a regular basis, they have that advantage. They know what to look for. And the training that we're talking about giving these people is to the point where if you are proficient with your firearm, there is a very good chance that you can stop an assailant without killing him. By the time the police get there and there's already dead people, they're going to put this person down as fast as possible. So, in order to actually maybe protect a disturbed child, a disturbed young person, if you have people that are trained in the school watching for this, I think you have a better chance of saving that child's life. Now, as I stated, I am for doing whatever is necessary to keep our children safe. And we can't live in a bubble. We can't push this away and say, this isn't going to happen to us. We need people with training. We need them in where they can do the best job. The other thing is, simply by passing this rule and letting the entire community know that there are people in that school with a gun is deterrent all by itself. Even if nobody's in the school with a gun, it's still a deterrent because they think there is. Now, the training is a must. Any other security measures that we can do to help this is also a must. I believe we need to go forward with this. I believe we can't just have our blindfolds on and ignore the possibility, because we are on the front lines. This stuff is going through our city all the time. There are bad people coming and going all the time. We need to do what's necessary to protect our children. Thank you.
My name's Alan Brown. I do live in the district. I've got 2 kids that are at UME and another 2 coming soon to the school. I am also a pediatrician that works at the hospital here. I grew up in Star Valley. I grew up with guns. I've had loaded guns next to the back door my entire life as a kid. Loved to go running out and playing with guns and shooting squirrels and pellet guns as a tiny kid, and bigger guns as we got older. I'm comfortable with guns. That doesn't lead to my support for this policy. My biggest concern with this is that numbers matter, data matters, facts matter, and we have a lot of numbers and a lot of data about this issue, and it's not in support of arming teachers in order to keep our kids safe. Dr. Bird already presented a lot of that to you, so I don't want to rehash all of that, but I'd kind of put it forward to you as an analogy of my world that I live in practicing medicine. If you look at gun-related deaths in this country as a disease, as a major public health problem that it is, if you compared it to a virus that was a new virus sweeping the country, and I told you that I had a developed medication that can treat this illness, but unfortunately, as all medications do at the end of the commercial, they list off the side effects. They all have them. The problem with this solution in this case is that the side effects are worse than the disease they're trying to cure. In America, there's about 50 million kids attending elementary schools and middle and high schools. There are school shootings that happen every year. The rate of that has gone slightly up over the last 20 years. It's not near as bad as all of us tend to think of it being, but it is increasing. We are seeing more school shootings. But there's millions and millions and millions of kids going to school every day and coming home safely. And there's a small number of shootings that are happening. If we were to put teachers in every classroom with firearms, we are going to see such a large increase in accidental shootings. 2014, we had an episode down in Utah where a teacher goes into the restroom and accidentally discharges her firearm that she's concealed carrying. Was she doing something inappropriate when that happened? Yes, accidents happen. And the rate of accidental deaths due to having weapons in every classroom is going to be astronomically higher than the actual school shootings that we're having now. So it just does not make any sense to take a medication that's worse than the disease. Even if this is a perfect medication that works every single time, that it does treat the illness every time, it still doesn't make sense if more people die from taking it as a side effect. As has already been mentioned, this isn't a perfect medication. Studies show that people in stressful situations don't shoot near as well as they do when they're going through training. Studies show that even well-trained professionals miss a lot. Where do those stray bullets go? They go flying down the halls full of kids. I can't understand the willingness, let me rephrase that. I can understand it. It is a very understandable reaction to say, we've got to do something, and it's a perfectly reasonable response. But doing something isn't always the right something. 2001, September 11th, 2 planes crashed into the World Trade Center towers, and a lot of Americans lost their lives. As a response to that, we did lots of things. We completely changed the way that we deal with air travel in this country, going through security measures, doing all kinds of different things. The result of that is more and more Americans became fearful of flying and chose to drive instead. As a result of that, a couple of really good studies out of Harvard a few years ago showed that on average we're losing about 300 to 400 people a year because of the security measures we have in place on airlines. We are killing people because of a knee-jerk reaction that seemed like an appropriate response to a serious threat. Data matter. In this case, we know that the risk of an accidental death is much higher than the risk of dying in an active shooter situation. The numbers are just not there. If you really put that many guns into a school, it's just insane how much more likely somebody is going to shoot somebody accidentally. And it's an inevitability that we will have more deaths. A couple of things that I wanted to bring up real quick, just to talk about some of the issues that others had mentioned. So gun-free zones. There's been a couple people that have brought up the idea that, you know, we're just sitting ducks in there in these gun-free zones and it's just attracting all these lunatics that are going to come shoot everybody. This is not an up for debate question. Over the last 40 years, so since 1966, 90% of all mass shootings occur where weapons are not prohibited. So in public places is where they happen. So yes, are there instances of someone coming into a school and shooting? Yes. That's not where the mass shootings are happening. They're happening at malls. They're happening at big conventions. They're happening in lots of places. Schools are not being singled out because they're gun-free. Schools are among the safest places in the country. Bringing guns in is not going to help that. It's going to make it worse. I would, again, encourage you all to look at the data. The data is there. It's really not questionable. There's no concern in my mind that there is a greater likelihood of my kid being safe in a school with guns in it. So I would encourage you all to look through that data carefully and make the decision that based on reason, that's based on what makes the most sense to decrease the likelihood of a kid dying. Not decrease the likelihood of them dying in a shooting, but what's the way to decrease the likelihood of them actually dying? And that is by avoiding having as many guns in the school as possible. So thank you very much.
Chris Bracken. I have a daughter in high school now. I had a son that graduated or left school last year, so I do live in the district. Spent 35 years as a law enforcement officer. Sorry, and I may get a little emotional. I wasn't going to get up and speak tonight. The last 6 years of my career was in the schools. People have gotten up here to this podium, and I attended the meetings the last time this came before the board. And I hear a lot of people come up here and they say that they're opposed to it, but they don't say why. They're opposed to guns. Bottom line. Okay. when we talk about mass shootings and school incidents, I was a new cop in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Just took over the SWAT team May 16th, 1986. I got a call. Our SWAT team was being summoned to go to Cokeville, Wyoming. This is a small town, Wyoming, Cokeville. 2 people took that school over with explosives, with firearms, with one intent, and that was to take the lives of everybody in that school. As a result, 2 people died. Fortunately, it was the 2 people that took the school hostage. But 74 others were injured. I was still in Jackson Hole. Well, no, actually, I moved down here. April 20th, 1999. I took over the SWAT team here. When the call went out that a mass shooting had taken place at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. 15 dead, 21 injured. I was a school resource officer at the time of Sandy Hook. December 14th, 2012, 26 dead. Parkland, Florida, just this past year. February 14th, 2018, 17 dead. Tell me that the mass shootings, that people are not dying in our schools. And that's only a few. Since Sandy Hook 2012, over 142 incidents where guns were involved in schools. I've listened to teachers. In fact, the last time I wish Mr. Destrup was here. Great principal. I truly enjoyed working with him as a school resource officer. And he made a comment, and I apologize if I don't quote him. He says, those kids, every one of those kids in my school are my children. If they are truly his children, and as a father, as a mother, wouldn't you do everything you possibly could to try to save their lives? Proper training. I've read the policy. It's a good policy. It asks for a lot of training. Not every teacher is going to be given a school like everybody wants to talk about. It's voluntary. People who feel comfortable with handling firearms are the ones that are going to want to be able to carry. We're not asking our teachers to go after that active shooter. But like in Sandy Hook, that principal went to confront the shooter. She died with her 22 children. A teacher at Parkland. I'm getting kind of tired of listening to the stories about how good this teacher was and how he was trying to save those children. And he died for it. But what if he had had a firearm instead of standing? Yes, he saved children, but others also died because he was unable to defend himself or to confront that man with a firearm. As a police officer, we wore a lot of equipment, and we went through a lot of equipment. Over the years, law enforcement has had to change because of society. After Columbine, we changed everything we did as far as training, firearms, and equipment, because we were responding to a different kind of society. A society where people are not afraid to walk into a school and take as many lives as they possibly can. Years ago, the FBI sent out a notice, a bulletin. It was shortly after the Twin Towers. And that bulletin to law enforcement said, we have intercepted intelligence, where ISIS says the way to attack America is through their children and into the schools. We're not just talking about homegrown. These are terrorists in other countries talking about our children. And we have to do everything we possibly can to protect them. And if we could put a few people in the schools that might be armed, that could possibly confront another person that's got a gun, more lives will be saved. They want to talk about accidental shootings. One incident in the state of Utah in 2014, and yet they've been carrying guns in their schools for years. I've thought about the safety of our schools. I lived it for 6 years. I walked around each and every one of those schools and thought, how is somebody going to attack this school, and how are they going to kill their children? And how can I prevent it? In 2012, after Sandy Hook, the state came out and said that they were going to put together a task force and go around to each and every one of our schools in this state to determine the weak points and to strengthen the security of our schools. It is now 2019 and the state still hasn't done anything. I am glad that Uintah County has stepped up and is trying to do something that our state won't do for us. And that's to protect our children. I'm for this. I've thought about it greatly. I've lost a lot of sleep over it. People that are properly trained to handle a firearm might be able to stop an active shooter and save a lot of lives. When we talk about 4 incidents, close to 100 children, 100 people, that's far too many. One is too many. I'm in support of it. I understand the concerns that people have. But I'm sorry, we got to put more tools on our belt. And we've got to do everything that we possibly can to protect our kids. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Monica Vilzakis, and I live within the boundaries of the district. I want to thank you for this opportunity. Kind of a tough act to follow, but to me, this is just a basic problem solving and logical thinking matter. And you start with what is the problem, right? And the problem is that we're afraid that there's going to be a school shooting. And then you have to go into what's the likelihood of that happening. Statistically, that's very low. There's evidence. And it's 1 in 614 million is the evidence. So you have this low probability of it happening. A child is more likely to die going to and from school in a school bus accident. They're more likely to die from a sports injury at school. They're more likely to die catching a communicable disease at school. And so I think it's important to take the fear and the drama out of this decision, because I think that when we make decisions based on fear and drama, that we often come up with bad results. Given the low probability of a shooting, what is proportional? There's been billions of dollars now spent on trying to make our children safer. And there's very little evidence that what has been bought makes our children any safer. There's good entrepreneurs out there selling wonderful products that don't make our children any safer. But why do we buy it? Because we're scared, and we're willing to, if we can throw $500,000 in something and it would protect our children and we'd sleep better at night, we'll do it. But that's not what we need to do. We need to look at the evidence. We need to make good decisions. The ideal result is not to have a teacher stop an active shooter. It's to prevent the shooting from ever occurring. And what do you do to do that? There's evidence that shows what helps make our schools safer. And that's a positive learning environment, an environment where where children feel safe. And there are children that do not feel safe around guns. Whether it's a teacher that carries it, whether it's an employee that carries it, you're making children feel less safe. Sandy Hook parents have created a program to promote a positive environment. Sandy Hook parents who lost their children don't say, arm the teachers. They say, let's stop the shooting. Let's stop someone from even wanting to come in. Teton County, I just saw, has a new program that creates a culture of kindness that they are not only doing in their schools, but they're doing it in their communities so that it's not just a school issue, right? Like, let's create it throughout our community. And we have a good community to do that in. We need to identify the kids that need help, and we need to provide counseling services. And I know that there's tight budgetary times, but all of the money that gets spent on policies and rules of firearms are taking away some of those services that could help the kids and not just prevent them from shooting, but help them live a productive life. We need to not encourage violent behavior. I was a little awestruck when I heard that last year an AR-15 was a senior project and it was brought into the schools. That's not okay. That creates distrust in the community, and it makes us feel like we can't trust common sense of administrators. If you really stand behind the phrase that you'll do anything to protect our children, it's the prevention that you need to focus on. And I should give you credit. There's a reporting system in place. And I heard on the radio the other day that statewide that has prevented a lot of shootings, right? Or not prevented a lot of shootings, but like if there's a report, they know they've been able to go in and talk to those children and stop the shooting from ever materializing. And there's been modifications to buildings and controlled access, which all help. All other measures should be taken before lethal methods such as guns are introduced. You know, there's a whole list of, and I have, in my written statement that I submitted, all of this evidence is in that. The departments that are opposed to having guns in school: the U.S. Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Department of Justice, FBI, Federal Emergency Management Agency, National Association of School Psychiatrists, the American School Counselors Association, School Social Work Association, the National Association of Resource Officers, the National Association of Elementary Principals, Secondary Principals, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the founder of the ALICE training. Interestingly, even WEA opposed the statute when it was before the legislature. Again, the basics of the planning: what's the risk and what's the proportional response? And if we're really talking about not trying to prevent a shooting, stopping it from happening, and we're talking about we're going to go in and defend our students, we should have an honest conversation and an evidence-based approach to whether arming a teacher does that. I would propose to you the evidence doesn't support that. There's no evidence that it's a deterrent. And in fact, oftentimes people go into a place like a school knowing that they're going to get shot, right? Most of the school shooters don't think that they're going to survive that. It wasn't a deterrent that there was an armed security guard in that school. There's also evidence that having a gun present increases aggressiveness. And so if a student's feeling pushed around by a teacher and they think that teacher might be carrying a gun, you've already escalated that situation. And the chance of of a teacher stopping a shooting. Again, you've heard some of the other. The accuracy goes to 30%. So what's happening to the other 70% of those bullets? Is it making our children more safe to have that happen? It's important that our kids know how to respond if there is a shooter, and drills are important for that. But even through all of this, if you look at all of this evidence and at the end of the day you're just hell-bent on passing this, I think you cannot ignore that there's parents and there's teachers and there's students that have fundamental rights that are being affected by this policy. I was a little discouraged, you know, that there was a court that acknowledged the fundamental rights of parents and teachers and students and the citizens at large. And when the proposed rule came out, there was nothing to address that. There was nothing changed that would have fixed that. There's a confidentiality provision in the statute that's very narrow. And the policy as it's written, the proposed rule as it's written, has expanded that. And because that now affects fundamental rights, it needs to be drawn as narrowly as possible. And I don't believe it was. And the sad part about all of it to me is that I think that there's a lot of educated, well-meaning people that could sit down and make this rule so that it could fit the needs of our school district. I think we've pushed it through because we're afraid and we're fear-based and we're just gotta do something, right? Like, we just gotta do something. We rely on catchphrases like a good guy with a gun can stop a bad guy with a gun. That's a false statement. It was done for a political purpose. And if that's the only evidence that we have to support it, then we are lacking a lot of evidence to support that this is a good proposed rule. Parents and students' rights can't be taken away, and you need to consider all of those when you're doing this rule. Our kids deserve better than this, and I think that we could get there. I just think that it's going to take some more work, and if we're really all about making sure that our kids are safe and doing anything to make them safe, then I think that's what needs to occur. Thank you for your time.
I got an open mic. Anyone else? If there is no one else in the audience that wants to speak tonight, then I think we would entertain a motion to continue the public hearing until next Tuesday at 6 p.m. And we'll continue it at that point in time. One last time, any other takers? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to continue until next week. Wait. Okay, motion by Jenny.
Second that motion.
Second by Dave. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion carries, and so we need a motion to adjourn it as well.
Madam Chairman, I move that we adjourn at this time.
And it's second by Jenny. Any discussion, if you want to stay? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you, folks, for coming. We will continue the public hearing next week at 6 o'clock.